Hi, and welcome to Cybernetlearners. I'm Ganesh, your guide on this thrilling journey into the world of cybersecurity. In today's hyper-connected landscape, understanding cybersecurity is crucial for everyone, from individuals to businesses. This channel is dedicated to empowering you with the knowledge and tools to safeguard your digital assets and stay one step ahead of cyber threats.
Well, I kind of characterize myself as a little bit of having a similar story like the Frank Abagnale Catch Me If You Can. Is when I was younger, I was really fascinated with telephones, computers, and magic, and I became a hacker. Not a hacker for profit like we see today, but more a hacker for intellectual curiosity.
Kevin Mitnick was probably the world's most notorious cyber thief when he was captured in 1995. And
Kevin Mitnick, a story of success, fame, and a lot of controversy. Ask any cybersecurity worker if they know who Kevin Mitnick is, and all of them will say that they know. But who is he? And how did he get there? Growing up, Kevin was always a cunning kid. By the age of 12, he was able to bypass the entire punch card system for the LA bus service. He simply asked the bus driver about where he could find some used tickets for a school project. He was recommended to go look in the trash, and so he did. And he found many unused blank transfers. Using this, Kevin could ride any bus in Greater LA for free. But this isn't all that Kevin did. Growing up, Kevin developed a deep interest for computer science, radio, and even fun little pranks. One of these pranks, which he would later recall as one of his favorite, was when he hacked into a McDonald's drive-thru. In the order window, he would simply replace the worker's voice with his own, and then say something ridiculous such as, "You are the 100th customer, so your order is free." But things only got bigger from there.
Digital Equipment Corporation.
It was a great honor to work for Digital. It was the company to be with.
Just tons and tons of camaraderie and teamwork and working together to find solutions.
The excitement is what I remember the most. The excitement of being at the top or very close to the top. The excitement of new products, new services.
I'm part of it, and that makes me proud.
At the age of 16, Kevin was a part of a group of fellow hackers. They dared Kevin to hack into a computer system named the ARC, owned by the Digital Equipment Corporation, also known as DEC. Wanting to be accepted by them so that he could learn more, he gave it a shot. The ARC computer system was used by DEC for developing their RSTS operating system software. After getting the name and phone number of the ARC system's administrator, he gave them a call. During the call, he used what is known as social engineering to get more information. Social engineering, simply put, is the manipulation of authorities into giving confidential information. Pretending to be one of the project's lead developers, he eventually got the password from the project manager. The password was, appropriately, buffoon. And within 5 minutes, he had access to the system. His peers were actually quite surprised by Kevin bringing back the credentials, and they logged in and downloaded some of DEC's source code. However, they then called DEC and let them know that Kevin had hacked them. At first, DEC charged Kevin with $4 million in damages. However, the US attorney corrected it to be $160,000. After this, Kevin became only more and more active. He ran away and disappeared from the light as a fugitive. Please note that much of this chapter is based off of New York Times journalist John Markoff. Markoff played a huge role in tracking down Kevin Mitnick. You will see why this is important later. It is said that while living underground, Kevin continued his endeavors, hacking into high-tech companies such as Motorola, Nokia, Sun, and several others. However, Kevin also hacked into another particular team's data files, whose leader had a reputation of being a brilliant computer expert. His name was Tsutomu Shimomura. Tsutomu, 30 at the time, was a computational physicist. He was a part of a close community of programmers and engineers that worked to defend the country's computer security. He recalled what had happened on the day of the attack in an interview.
Kevin Mitnick is. What happened was Kevin or one of his associates, someone who's close to Kevin, broke into one of my machines Christmas Day in 1994 in San Diego while I was out of town trying to go skiing. And a team of us, 2 or 3 of us actually, 2 of us flew back. There were other people present. We decided that we needed to analyze these machines to figure out how this break-in had been accomplished, what damage had been done.
What was it that drove him to break into your computer?
We don't know for sure. My best guess is that he knew that I do computer security research. This is one of the things I've been doing for the last few years. He knew I was a researcher, and my guess is that he thought that I might have some information on my machines that would help him break into other machines.
First, Shimo spent several weeks analyzing the break-in and how it was done. Eventually, an article was written with the details of Shimo's data breach. John Markov studied the details and concluded that it was most likely Kevin Mitnick doing these attacks. He placed Kevin's name on the front page of the New York Times, and he became a wanted man. January 27, 1995. Bruce Kobal, a computer programmer working for a public policy group known as Computers, Freedom and Privacy, received an odd message from a commercial online service known as The Well. They told Kobal that his group was taking up hundreds of millions of bytes from The Well's network storage space, which was much more than they were authorized to use. Kobal checked his group's directory on The Well and noticed someone had broken in and filled it with Shimomura's files. After being told of this, Shimomura then recruited 2 other computer experts and set up their own monitoring system at The Well's headquarters that could watch the intruders' activity unnoticed. Shimo's team eventually discovered that someone hacked into Netcom communications and obtained a copy of 20,000 members' credit card numbers. The team decided to move its work area to Netcom's network center in San Jose. Netcom was an internet service provider, and all someone needed to do to receive its service was make a telephone call. And since Netcom was a cross-country network for computer dial-in lines, the hacker could use various dial-in lines to keep his location and identity arbitrary. Saturday, February 11. Shimo finally found suspicious cellular activity on Netcom coming from Raleigh, North Carolina. He found that calls were going through a local switching office operated by GTE, but GTE's records showed that the calls were looping through a nearby call switch operated by Sprint. But someone had been manipulating the software, where GTE thought the call came from Sprint, and Sprint thought the call came from GTE. Thus, neither company kept track of the identifying phone. Shimo called a Sprint technician and was able to find the source who was making the looping calls. When he called the source number, he could hear the hang-up sound over and over again. Sunday, February 12. Shimo flew from San Jose to Raleigh to finish the hunt down. Monday, February 13. Starting from 1 a.m., Shimo rode around the city in the passenger seat of a car, with a Sprint technician driving. He was carrying a cellular frequency direction-finding antenna and reading the displays on a laptop. By just 1:30 a.m., he was able to pinpoint Mitnick's location, a 12-unit apartment called Players Court in Raleigh Hills, northwest Raleigh. Later that week, the FBI surveillance team issued the warrant and arrested Mitnick from apartment 202. The chase was finished.
The FBI's most wanted computer hacker is behind bars. Kevin Mitnick was...
Following this arrest, Kevin is sentenced to 4.5 years in prison. Added on top of that was 8 months of solitary confinement. However, the decision made by the officials was actually quite a controversial one. Kevin was detained without even having a trial, and also not being able to help his lawyer look at the evidence. As said before, much of the information that has been described up until now has been from John Markov's point of view. In 2001, a magazine known as 2600 came out with a new story, claiming that they had the truth that was not misconstrued by the media. They say that John Markov's storytelling had some serious inaccuracies. In Kevin's story on the front cover of New York Times Magazine, it is said that he stole 20,000 credit card numbers. However, several paragraphs later, it says that he had never used any of them. In fact, Netcom had been having these credit card numbers laying around for almost a year.
Netcom credit card file. Everybody had that file. If you didn't have that file, you were a loser. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of people had that. They swapped it around like, bubble gum or something. And then they claim that he's the one that did it and he's the one that had it when that was floating around for months before he theoretically had it.
And in all of Kevin's history of hacking, he never threatened anyone or claimed that he was going to do any sort of harm to people. And how do we know this? Kevin's 25-count indictment did not contain anything more than him just lying on the telephone about who he was and copying software that he never intended to sell or redistribute. And nowhere did it talk about the 20,000 credit card numbers, like in John Markoff's story.
Everybody and his sister's got 1 million credit card numbers. What's the big deal with credit card numbers? It's a meaningless thing to have. I mean, what I want to know is, did he threaten anybody in any way? Did he claim he was going to do some particular set of harm? Are there any notebooks that show that he had plans to, conspire to commit any particular thing?
While Kevin was in prison, Markoff and Shimo wrote a book that was poorly received. Kevin would later say that the book was fundamentally inaccurate. Later on, a Hollywood movie was made off of Markoff and Shimo's book. In the movie, Kevin bashed Shimo in the head with a garbage can. However, in real life, the only time that Kevin ever met Shimo was for a moment in court. Kevin never argued that what he had done was not wrong, but he has stated time and time again that he never had any kind of malicious intent.
I saw myself as an electronic joyrider having a great time on the information superhighway. I felt like I was like James Bond behind the computer. It was a big game to me. I was just having a blast.
Did it ever occur to you that perhaps what you were doing was wrong?
Oh yeah, it was an invasion of privacy. Going and getting access to other people's information is obviously a gross invasion of privacy, and it is wrong.
And that didn't bother you?
At the time I was doing it, no.
His list of victims reads like a who's who of big business. They include Motorola, Sun Microsystems, Nokia, and software maker Novell. All told, the companies estimate Mitnick cost them $300 million in damages.
I believed I caused some damage, but nowhere near that number. I was an accomplished computer trespasser. I don't consider myself a thief. I didn't deprive these companies out of their software. I merely made a copy without doing anything more with it. How the theft and fraud guidelines work is you're punished based on the value of the property taken, damaged, or destroyed.
As if you took the only copy.
Right. So the value of this can of Red Bull is maybe a couple bucks. Now, in the case that I made a copy of source code so I could look at it, moved it over to USC or moved it over to university so I could examine it with the least likelihood of being detected, is the prosecutors use the theory as if in a regular tangible theft case that the loss to the victims were the value of the source code. So they simply called up the victims or wrote them a letter and said, provide us a letter that summarizes the value of the source code. So all these companies provided their R&D investments. So you had Sun Microsystems saying, well, we wrote Solaris, it cost us over $80 million to develop. Nokia, with their cell phone, cost them over $131 million to develop the Nokia phone. And they're basically saying that they basically turned this theory on its head, and I was punished as if I deprived these companies of their software, as if I took it and destroyed their copy.
Do you see yourself as a criminal?
In the definition, of the legal definition, yes, because there was a law and I broke it. Okay. The crimes that I were charged with, and that I pled to, I believe I committed some of them, but I didn't commit others. And the ones that I don't believe I'm guilty of is computer fraud and wire fraud, but I do believe I'm guilty for possessing access devices and intercepting electronic communications. There was one case, because I used to do all this legal research when I was in jail, this one case involving a guy named Richard Sabinski. He was an IRS agent on the East Coast. And what he did is he used IRS computers to get people's tax return information. And he was caught, I guess because they audit. And he went to trial. He was basically charged with wire fraud and computer fraud, the same statutes that I was charged with. And he was convicted, and he was sentenced to 6 months in prison, okay, a lot less than 5 years. And then he appealed it, basically saying, using the argument
by looking at this information and by making a copy of it, I didn't deprive anybody of the value. I didn't deprive them of this property. So he took it all the way up to the appellate court. So it's the first court in U.S. history to look at the issue. What line do you have to cross before there's a deprivation of their property interest in the information? And the court had ruled that the government would have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the person who looked at the information would have had the intent to use it or disclose it to the detriment of the owner. And in my case, the government never alleged, and they fully were aware that I wasn't intending to use or disclose that information. And that's what I wanted to go to trial on, saying, yeah, I got in, I looked at the information, but I had no malicious intent to use it or disclose it, so hence I'm not guilty of fraud, because I didn't deprive Motorola, Nokia, Fujitsu, NEC of their property interest. Yes, I trespassed and I snooped, but it didn't amount to fraud. It hasn't been my argument that I didn't do anything wrong and I didn't deserve to be punished. My argument was what I really did was trivial in a sense. I caused some loss, nowhere near the losses the government has accused me of, and it certainly didn't give the federal judiciary or the federal prosecutors the right to disregard my constitutional rights. I sat in prison for 4 long years awaiting trial. I'm the only one in U.S. history that was held without a bail hearing. But the reason you want the hearing is you have a right to testify, to proffer evidence, to have representation by counsel, to hear the government side of the case. And then what happens is you could appeal that decision of the lower court because they look at the hearing and they see it on paper in the transcripts. Well, if you never have the hearing, you also don't have the right to appeal a hearing that never occurred. And constitutionally, before the government could deprive you of your freedom, you have a right to a hearing, period.
When we talked to John Markoff in the film, he seemed to be unaware that you were even in solitary confinement, which I found to be amazing.
I think he is aware of it. He has to be very careful because his whole reputation's on the line here, and he knows in his heart he has done wrong. He knows in his heart that he didn't report the facts. And he knows in his heart what his real motive is to write the Kevin Mitnick book. I believe this to be true because John Littman, who would have no reason to lie to me, told me he had met John Markoff for lunch in San Francisco, and he confided to John Littman that he wanted to do the Kevin Mitnick book. And then he offered John Littman the opportunity to do an article in Playboy regarding me. And Markoff uses that as I was never interested in Mitnick. I gave John Littman the opportunity to write this article in Playboy, but the reason Markoff couldn't do it, there was apparently some sort of conflict of interest. So there was another reason. It's not that he just didn't want to, there was a reason why he could not.
There was to describe people who do malicious things, correct?
Right. There's other words like vandals. Like what Markoff called me, labeled me in his articles was a computer vandal that has run amok. When I never vandalized anything in my life, physical or electronically.
I was sent to prison for 5 years. 8 months was in solitary confinement because a federal prosecutor told the judge that if they allowed me to have access to the phone within prison, that I could whistle into the phone, communicate with a modem at NORAD, Northern Air Defense, and actually launch an ICBM, which is totally not true. Being in solitary was kind of tough. Imagine going into your home tonight when you get out of school or out of the office and locking yourself in your bathroom and not leaving your bathroom for 23 out of 24 hours a day. And then for an hour a day, they give you a little bit more room, but you're outside. You could look up at the sky. It's pretty horrific. It takes a lot of time for the human to adapt to those conditions, but we can adapt to anything, right, eventually. It was really tough, and I spent most of my time reading and sleeping, because what else are you going to do in solitary confinement?
While in jail, Kevin received a huge amount of support from the public. A movement known as the Free Kevin movement began. People protested out on the streets with signs and even put stickers on their cars and laptops saying "Free Kevin." People protested for both the freedom of Kevin as well as stopping Miramax, the company that produced the movie Trackdown, which painted Kevin in a bad image.
At issue, this script entitled Takedown, the story of the nation's most notorious computer hacker, Kevin Mitnick. It's a script these Kevin Mitnick supporters say is libelous and would hurt Mitnick's chances of getting a fair trial.
It might influence the jury. It might change a lot of things in a negative way. I mean, he's trying so hard to get it, to at least get a trial, and then this comes up where he's constantly being defamed.
Even radio show host Laszlo showed up.
With the proliferation of TV news journalism like Primetime Live and these shows that completely distort the facts, what I do at my part on the radio with my syndicated show is try to get people to open their brains, because I talk to a lot of old people out there because I'm on a lot of news talk stations. So when I can, I put Manuel or Bernie S. or anybody else on there to talk about the state of what's going on, because nobody else is going to cover it. And the people that do cover it in the mainstream media are going to cover it for profit, like the guy that wrote the book.
And Kevin saw all this.
Let's talk a little bit about, finally getting out, the Free Kevin movement.
Oh, yeah, well, I mean, a lot of stuff was happening in my case. Like, I was detained for 4.5 years without trial, and and a lot of civil liberties issues. So then 2600 Magazine actually started this Free Kevin movement to kind of, like, why is this guy denied the ability to help his lawyer look at the evidence? Why has he been held for so many years, in custody without a trial? So they started this whole Free Kevin movement, and it was, and I couldn't believe this. One day I was in my room in detention, and I look out this, like, they have the slitted window, and I look out, and I heard they were having Free Kevin protests that day, and I look, and I see an airplane flying, like a puddle jumper, and it was pulling a Free Kevin banner on an airplane, and I could see this from my prison cell. So I was kind of like, wow, like, I never expected this. And anyway, they were trying to get the word out to, it wasn't like the Free Kevin movement was saying, hey, this guy shouldn't be punished for his hacking. It was more like, why is he held detained for so long? Why is the judge not allowing his lawyers to look at the evidence? So it was kind of to get the word out, and they did a good job of it, and ultimately, did it help my case? No, because the government doesn't care really about, protests.
On January 21st of 2000, Kevin was finally released from prison. Since then, Kevin has had big changes in the direction of his hacking endeavors. Knowing how easy it was to break into even the top companies' technology, he realized that he had plenty of rare expertise on cybersecurity to educate the world on. He appeared in front of Congress shortly after release to share his ideas.
Litigation, and despite that fact, I'm with you here today. And
I've seen those documents several times. Yeah. United States of America versus, it's kind of intimidating, isn't it?
Sure is, and despite that, I'm ready, willing, and able and to assist, and that's why I'm here today. I appear before you today to discuss your efforts to create legislation that will ensure the future security and reliability of information systems used by the federal government. Breaching information security measures is a difficult undertaking. As I stated in my prepared remarks, my success depended on exploiting weaknesses in computer systems and network security and the use of social engineering techniques. However, even the sophisticated techniques I've exploited for 2 decades depended on the lack of commitment by software manufacturers to deliver software free of security weaknesses. The federal government has no control over the security weaknesses that software manufacturers permit to reach the marketplace. Thus, it is imperative to enhance other security measures to overcome these shortcomings. The human side of computer security is easily exploited and constantly overlooked. Companies spend millions of dollars on firewalls, encryption, and secure access devices, and it's money wasted because none of these measures address the weakest link in the security chain: the people who use, administer, operate, and account for computer systems that contain protected information. It's my understanding that this committee oversees information security for the Internal Revenue Service and the Social Security Administration. In closing, I'd be happy to offer my knowledge and expertise to the committee regarding methods that may be used to counteract the weakest link in the security chain, the human element of information security. And that's it. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. That was very, very short, but very powerful, Mr. Mitnick. Thank you very much.
Since then, Kevin has performed several jobs in both the public and private sector. This includes being an international contractor for assessing information security vulnerabilities, as well as writing 4 books about hackers and hacking. Today, he is the CEO of Mitnick Security Consulting, where him and his team, known as the Global Ghost Team, are paid by companies to test hack into their security system and improve it. Kevin also does public speaking at various computer technology conferences, educating people on the world of cybersecurity.
Kevin Mitnick has grown up. Took a little while, but I finally did.
He wasn't exactly wealthy. He had never used or sold any of the information he accessed. Kevin pleaded guilty to 7 counts, including wire fraud, computer fraud, possession of access devices, and interception of data communications. He served 5 years in prison. When he was released on January 21st, 2000, he said, "My case is a case of curiosity."
Now, Kevin Mitnick is the world's most famous hacker.
Kevin Mitnick is a security consultant and CEO of Mitnick-Security.
He used his hacking skills ethically by advising companies on strengthening their security, and also shared helpful everyday advice.
0000000. And voila, stay safe, don't trust the safes.
Kevin had created a new life for himself and found love again, marrying Kimberly, whom he met at a cybersecurity conference in Singapore. But his happiness would be cut short. In 2022, Kevin received the devastating news that he had pancreatic cancer, which he battled for 14 months. On July 16, 2023, Kevin Mitnick died peacefully. He was 59 years old. At the time of his passing, his wife was pregnant. Kimberly later expressed, "Our son will know you, and I am convinced he will be a mini you." Kevin Mitnick went from being the world's most wanted hacker to the world's most wanted security expert. His insights have changed how companies and individuals protect their most sensitive data. As Kevin reflected on his remarkable journey, he said it was just like magic.
నడుమై నాటకం విధిలీల వెంటై బంధము రక్త సంబంధము తోడుగా రాదుగా తుది వేళ మరణమనేది ఖాయమని మిగిలెను కీర్తి ఖాయమని